Ohio high school football. It's a juggernaut each and every week. I'm going to take you on an inside look at the high school coaching world. In the world of high school coaching, there is far more than what people see after 7 p.m. on a Friday night. This is the coach's approach.
Welcome to the Coach's Approach, a podcast where we sit down with high school coaches and get the cold, hard facts about the high school coaching world. This is the Coach's Approach, where we talk X's and O's. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is the Coach's Approach, where we talk the X's and O's. Win the day or dominate the day. The choice is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coach's Approach podcast. I'm your host, George Gresco, and we have a good one for you guys today. In our intro, it says Ohio high school football, but today we're going across the country to California. Today in the coach's booth, we have one of the most influential and motivational coaches in the country, Coach Kurt Hines. Welcome to the show.
Coach, I'm honored and humbled to join you. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, no problem. I told you I was going after heavy hitters right off the bat, so I was like, I got to get Coach Kurt Hines on the show. But before we get started, I need to shout out my sponsors. We have a few new ones today. Coach's Dry Rub. The guy that owns Coach's Dry Rub is actually a defensive coordinator at one of our schools in our area. Coach's Dry Rub, the all-American rub, laid on thick until it sticks. The Well Bar and Grill in Kirtland. Stop in for some great food and have a good time. Anthony's Family Restaurant in Eastlake on the corner of 91 and Vine Street, where together is our favorite place to be. Also, G&G Printing. Get your custom apparel printed in 7 to 10 days or less. Dominate your design. Coach, once again, welcome. I'm going to start off with your background and kind of how you got to where you're at now. A lot of people probably don't know that you were born and raised in Rhode Island.
Yes, sir.
And you didn't start your athletic career in the sport of football. You started as a hockey player. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just growing up on the East Coast, I think I started hockey and football actually the same calendar year, if you will. But loved hockey, played it for 9 years. You know, growing up there was a pond just about half a mile from our house that would freeze over obviously every winter, and love the physicality of that. Just love the game of hockey, and played that, and then actually spent one season playing baseball as a uncoordinated fat little kid. I remember being being up at bat twice in practice and being hit with the ball and being allowed, if you will, to take a base. And I remember even in second grade when that happened, thinking to myself, "Wait a minute, he just hit me. I get to walk to a base," like eyeing that pitcher down like I wanted to take his life. So it was not a long-lived sport. So hopped over to football real quick and played hockey and football all the way from second grade through eighth grade. And then I loved my high school coaches, just great men. But one of the first lessons, without even knowing it, one of the first lessons I learned as a coach, well before I knew I wanted to coach, was encouraging and allowing our student athletes to be multi-sport athletes.
Absolutely.
Coach, and I don't think he had any ill will behind this, but he was adamant that when it was not football season, you were in that weight room.
And that's good. You need those coaches around. Just having these guys compete year-round, just getting competitive. That's competitive spirit. That's huge in today's world.
It is. I just wish, what I try to tell our players is, hey, once football's over, if you're passionate, and I mean passionate about other sports, go play those sports. Give your all, basketball, track, wrestling, whatever it is. But I do say to them, if you're not passionate about it, what are you doing playing it? Then come in the weight room and compete with us in the weight room. So my hockey days ended in eighth grade, and then I just continued with football from there on out.
Okay, and that's what I was getting into. And then you started playing football. You were more passionate about the football side of things. You played center throughout your high school career. Where did you attend high school at?
Barrington High School in Barrington, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And it's funny. My nephew, my brother, and his family still live back in Barrington, Rhode Island. Okay. So my nephew just finished his senior season, playing for my same old head coach.
Oh, that's awesome! How cool is that?
Yeah, it's so cool. He had left for a few years and came back. So a shout out to Coach Sandy Gorham, who's
I was just about to ask. I said, you want to give any shout out to your boys back home?
yeah, I don't think Coach Gorham is on any social media platforms or whatnot, but he played football at University of Rhode Island, was an All-American linebacker there, and I just remember he was just passionate and on fire about everything. So I'm blessed to have him as a coach.
No, that's awesome. And then you went on to play college football at Plymouth State University. You switched positions and became a tight end. That must have been pretty cool being a center your high school career to go and catching passes at tight end. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny because if I knew this podcast wasn't going to be shared anywhere,
Right.
I'd feel comfortable to lie and say, yeah, I was a tight end. I was catching passes all over the place. I did switch from center to tight end, but I was a glorified lineman. I was a blocking. I was a blocking tight end.
You were that goal line guy that we put in.
Exactly. I did go out for a few passes, did catch a few, but although I like to think I have nice hands, good hands, I was a glorified lineman playing on the end of the line.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, you didn't play your senior football season at Plymouth State University, but you did get involved in something amazing to me. You worked with the Special Olympics and even coached a Special Olympics flag football team. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I love that you did your homework. So I really kind of my senior year in college, I had lost my passion for it. My wife and I been married for 27 years now, but we met in college. And our oldest daughter was from a previous relationship through my wife, a relationship she had. So when I met my wife, I actually met Hallie, our now 31-year-old daughter. I met her when she was a year and a half old.
Oh, wow.
So our relationship for my wife and I got real serious real quick. And I just kind of lost my passion for the game. To this day, I have zero regrets about walking away from the game. It's just, it's one of those things where, people can say, he quit, I'm a firm believer. How many of us have in years past dated one young woman, didn't quit, but she wasn't right for us, or we weren't right for her, and
Absolutely.
we moved on.
Right.
So many of us have had multiple jobs, and not that we quit on that job, but we were given a better offer, or we wanted to move on for whatever reason. So my walking away from football at that time, I still to this day, by the grace of God, have zero regrets. But what it did do, as you mentioned, is I had a college professor who mentioned to a teammate and I that they were looking for volunteers to coach a special needs flag football team. And for me, that was a moment in my life that I wasn't looking for, but it changed the trajectory of my life to this day. Because there was a young woman, probably 6th grade, who had Down syndrome. And I remember one of the practices where she and I were, 4 yards apart at best, where I was throwing a football to her, 2 hands, underhand, and she dropped the first 4 or 5, whatever it was, and always picked it up with a smile. And that 5th or 6th time I tossed it to her that she caught the ball, her eyes lit up, and I was like, man, this child just.
And that's what it's all about right there. That's what it's all about right there.
100%. She lit my world on fire. And I wish I remember her name so I could reach out to her family or whatever. But I remember thinking at that moment, and that was the first time ever I thought I wanted to coach football. I always knew I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. But she lit up in a way I was like, man, if I can do that, if I can help others, special needs or not, other human beings to have moments like that, that's what it's all about. So what happened was I had walked away, or not walked away. Once I graduated college, I got into teaching right away. And after my 3rd year of teaching elementary school, I reached out to a head coach of a local high school and said, hey, I'm just looking to help out, volunteer, not even a position. And the cool thing, without getting preachy to your audience, for me, it was a God moment, a God thing, was I'd reached out to this head coach, had never met him. And he said, hey, I'm free on this day. Why don't I come by? Well, he shows up to my classroom. We were in the same town where I taught, with a manager from the football team who just happened to have Down syndrome.
Wow.
I was like, man, this is kind of a cool thing. This is a cool coincidence. And it just so happened that they were looking for a head freshman coach. So I was kind of baptism by fire, thrown into the coaching world.
Yeah.
I think all of us as players think we know a certain amount, and some of us do and some don't. I knew a lot less than I thought I did.
Yeah, right.
Started coaching and made a ton of mistakes, but fell in love with it right away. And 25 years later, I'm still doing it and still learning a lot, but love everything about it.
No, that's fantastic. And that's the world works in mysterious ways sometimes. It really, really does.
Amen.
You mentioned it. You broke into the coaching world in the year 2000. You got hired as a freshman football coach and strength coach at, I believe, it's Sahegan High School. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
am I okay? So
Yep.
I pronounced that right. I
Yeah.
was practicing that all day. But you break in the coaching world at Sahegan High School in New Hampshire, a home of the Sabres.
Yes,
You were
sir.
at Sahegan for 7 seasons. You were a young coach at the time, as you already mentioned, but you must have learned a ton because from the what I've read, you went to 6 state title games over that time, winning one of them. Can you talk a little bit about that 7 year span at Sahegan? I mean, that's incredible to me.
Yeah, I was so blessed to have my first high school coaching experience, to be with someone who, and for me, this is the importance of the order: loved people and loved the game. Because I think the world is overpopulated with people that love the game and use people.
Yeah,
They will spend all the time with the studs and just ignore. Well, they won't admit this, but they'll ignore the kids that can't put their helmet on straight or can't tie their own cleats
right.
or whatever.
Agreed. Yeah.
Um, and Mike Beliveau, still coaching to this day, he's now an assistant at Sohegan, but he took me on his staff, took me under his wing, and it's funny because while at Sohegan, at the end of every season, he would pull me aside and say, "Hey, Kurt, come on up to the varsity." And I don't know why, but I was like, "No, I'm good. I like doing my own thing here with the freshmen and stuff." And I would still help out with the varsity and be at every game and coaches meeting, and just learn how to do things right. Um, there's one thing I learned from him. I think we can learn from all people, whether we respect them or not. And I learned a lot of great things from Coach Beliveau. One thing I do differently was I feel like he had every coach in the state on his staff come Friday night.
Right.
But during the week, there were certain coaches of us that were committed to being there every day that we had to be there. And then he would say yes to everyone. And I feel like there were certain coaches on staff that kind of just showed up to wear the coaching cage jacket or
Oh
whatever.
yeah, you get those guys all the time.
Yeah, and I tell our staff when I've been blessed to be a head coach, family's got to come first. Like if your child has a birthday party or something, don't miss that for football.
Sure.
Aside from that, I want us at everything. But yeah, while at Sohegan, we had tremendous success, and I only left Sohegan after 7 or 8 years, whatever it was. You're probably right; it probably was 7. I only
Oh,
left because
yeah.
I was asked to coach at the high school where my wife and I lived, just over
Right.
the border.
And
So
I'm gonna go ahead and say that's Goffstown.
yes, sir,
Yeah,
Goffstown, New Hampshire.
getting in that next. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Then in 2007, you headed to Goffstown High School, also in New Hampshire, home of the Grizzlies now.
yes, sir.
You became a varsity assistant coach. You guys had you made it to the state semifinals that season. While at Goffstown, you coached just about every position. You coached running backs, DBs, special teams, and were the strength coach. How important is it for a young coach like you were at the time to learn all aspects of the game, offense, defense, special teams, and just learn about the offseason? How important is that?
It's huge. I think it allows us as coaches to not only have a greater understanding of the game itself, but a greater appreciation. I think whatever position we coach, whether we're a coordinator or not, we often, as we should, in my opinion, take pride of the blessing of coaching that position. When you get a chance to step outside of whatever position you maybe played as or started coaching as, and you start coaching other positions, it really opens your eyes to how detailed the game is and how intricate each position is and how important it is that no matter how you want to say it, I think Coach Belichick often said or still says, do your job. In other
Yeah,
words, trust the other 10 guys in the field, do your
absolutely.
job. And it's hard to do that as a coach and really understand that as much as we can if we haven't coached other positions.
Sure.
And I think the more time we can spend learning from other coaches, and I love football. I love everything about the game, but I do think that our sport is overpopulated with arrogant coaches.
No,
You know?
I mean that's just a fact. I mean that in our profession, there's a certain arrogance, and that's just the way it's always going to be, and it ain't changing.
Right, right. But I think if we can harness that and say, hey, I have a confidence in who I am as a coach. I know my strengths, but at the same time, I think there's so much beauty when we can say, hey, here are my strengths. I'm really good at these things. I'm not great at these. I need to work on these things here, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 5. And then, if we're the same coach today that we were 5 years ago, we need to get out of coaching,
Yeah.
because the game has evolved. It's always evolving. The game's always changing. And if we're not evolving and changing with it, we're doing a disservice to those we coach.
No, absolutely. I think the most beneficial year of my soon-to-be coaching career was I went to John Carroll University. I hurt my shoulder, which ultimately ended my playing career. And but that season, while I was hurt, I sat in every meeting, every two-a-day meeting, every coaches meeting, anything I could get to, just to learn as much football as possible. I still think that was the most beneficial year, was me being hurt. And I just, I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I was hurt, but that's the most football I learned, just talking with the college coaches and things like that.
Love it.
So, yeah. After only one season at Goffstown, you get hired as the head football coach at Bedford High School in New Hampshire in 2008. This was your first head coaching job. In your first year coaching at Bedford, you had no seniors on the football team.
Correct.
How tough was that for you to build a program with no seniors?
What's funny? It was hard. It was hard. Obviously seniors at any school, regardless of what state you're in, they're bigger, typically faster, stronger. They're just, longer time being a young man,
Yeah.
and more hormones and growth. That was tough. It's funny though, because we lost I jokingly say when I go speaking to places, depending on the topic, and I'll often say, hey, my first year as head coach in New Hampshire, I set records throughout the state. And you can see some people fold their arms like, all right, who's this arrogant SOB? What's he talking about? Or some people fall for it. And I don't really know if it's a record or not, but I really felt like the record I set was by getting our teeth kicked in more than any other school in the history of football. Like when you walk through and shake hands after, whether you win or lose, you walk through and shake hands with the opposing team. What do we always say to each other?
Yeah, good game. Good game.
Good game. No one even lied to us, coach. We were so bad that no one even lied to us. Brand new stadium. People would come through and shake hands and like, what a beautiful field. Great stadium. Like,
Yeah.
man, we're that bad. I look back at it, and the reason we lost every game that my first year as head coach, not having seniors played a part of it,
Sure.
but was such a small part of it. I just did so much wrong. And I'm fortunate that the administration believed in me enough to keep me on. And it's funny because, our playbook was this thick, and I was the offensive coordinator, and we ran 99% of it horribly because of me. I tried to do too much, and it wasn't
Right.
that the players didn't want to be there. It wasn't that they didn't want to learn. It wasn't that we didn't have some studs. It was just I tried to do way too much. I still look at my first year as being a head coach as my greatest coaching year to date. Now, I'm not saying most enjoyable, because that was a
Right.
painful year. Those walks up the bleachers after getting our teeth kicked in were it was kind of like the Green Mile, dead man walking.
Oh, yeah.
You could feel people burning through you, with their eyes and their looks. But it was one of the greatest years ever coaching, because it really solidified my why.
Sure.
And I say this with the most respect to any coach that's ever coached this game or any other. Being a coach, period, assistant, volunteer, head coach, coordinator, is a hard job. It's a demanding job.
Oh, yeah.
Being a head coach is much harder, in my opinion, simply because you've got to answer to a lot more people. You got to work with the boosters and the fundraising,
Oh,
and
yeah.
scheduling, and all that stuff. So losing every game my first year as a head coach really made me take a good, hard look at myself and say, why do I want this? Why do I want to be a head coach? Because it's not easy, but it'd be easier for me to pack it in and go back to being an assistant.
Absolutely.
And for me, my why as to why I want to be a head coach is I want to be able to be in position to hire other men or women around me that have the same goal that I do. Because I
Sure.
think the world has enough coaches that know the game, but don't have enough coaches yet that know and love people.
Right. And I think that's an important aspect. You could know all the X's and O's in the world, but if you don't genuinely care about these kids, that's where winners are made, in my opinion. That's where when players want to play for that head coach. And I think that's so important in today's world. I really do.
Amen. And you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. We have to know our craft. We have to know the X's and O's. But it's going to be fleeting. Any success we have, if we're not pouring into it. I know I'm not the only coach that says this, but I tell our players all the time, if I'm only helping you become stronger in the weight room, I'm failing you. If I'm only
Right.
helping you become a better football player, I'm failing you. I
Yep.
want to help them become better.
Right. And
Stronger.
again, it's life after football. That's the most important thing is football is all of our careers are going to end one of these days, but it's
Yep.
life after when you're done playing. I think that's important.
Exactly.
In your first season, as you mentioned, you didn't win a game. That was in 2008. Then you went 2-7 in 2009, 5-4 in 2010. But then you reached the state title game in 2011. You went from 0-9 with no seniors to a state title game 4 years later. Can you talk about the process you kind of went through in your first 4 seasons as a head coach?
Yeah, getting to that success all came down to the fact that I'm just that good. No, I'm just kidding. You just dropped all your listeners. Just said this guy's a clown. It's funny because I think it comes down to believing in ourselves as coaches. We have to know what our passion is, what our why is, and just like we preach to our players, trust the process.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier for me as a coach to look at a young man who's not where he wants to be yet, and to say with him with the utmost confidence, trust the process. Keep fueling your body. Keep doing this. But when it's ourselves, it's a lot harder. It's a real
it's different. Yeah.
gut. We were able to achieve that success because I believe the relationships we forged with those young men and the young women. We had young women on the team. That they bought into what we were selling, and that was, hey, we're creating champions on and off the field.
Absolutely.
And if you stick it out long enough, you're going to be a part of it. And the tough thing was that second year when we had seniors, when you get to a point, second game of the season, third game, fourth season, and you're 1-5 or whatever it is, and those seniors know they're not going to the playoffs. When they keep showing up day in and day out and keep pushing themselves, that's when you have something special, because it's easy to practice in August.
Right. The mini camps and T-shirt and the helmet, that's the easy stuff.
That's
right?
the fun stuff, yeah. When you are, in late October and you're looking at a 0 season, you're 0-7 at that point or whatever it is, or you're 1-8, whatever it may be. And the young men keep showing up then and keep showing up with the same focus and intensity and passion. That's when you have something. So the fact that we were able to make the state championship my 4th season is really a testament to every young man and woman and parent and booster and administrator who believed in what we were doing.
Absolutely. In your first 2 seasons, you went 2-16 as a first-time head coach. How did you continue to make people happy? Because you're first-year head coach, parents get disgruntled very fast. Administration gets phone calls. We're not winning. We're not this. How did you keep the dogs off, essentially?
Yeah. It's worded differently, and I love the way how you said it, so not any better, but I've had people say to me before, how do you get parents on your side? And I believe my answer for both your question and that question is develop relationships with the young men and young women so that they go home and sing your praises without you asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure if you have children or not.
No, I'm no kids yet.
Not yet. My wife and I have 4 and 2 grandsons. What's the one thing I think, in my opinion, not saying it's true, but I can only imagine the one thing, if we had to choose, that every parent wants for their child is to truly be happy, to truly find joy in life through the high times, through the low times, and everything in between. And when the players we're blessed to coach, winning or losing, know as a coach that you love them. Know that you will not. We always hear about players that will run through a wall for a coach.
Oh yeah.
When the players know that their coach will run through a wall for them, when the players see that I am pouring into our starter just as much as I am to our 3rd string or 4th string player that may never see the varsity field, they understand that we don't just say it's more than just a game, that it really is. So I think a lot of what kept some of the dogs off, because there were those parents that were like, hey, listen, we didn't vote for this school to be built and support this team to have a 0-4 season or whatever, is developing those relationships with no hidden agenda. Well, obviously we'll never mention names on this, but I've been blessed with coaches that I think do it right. And I've also coached with coaches that know the game really well, but use players for their own agenda.
I
And the
believe
kids see
that. Oh yeah.
and I think when you do it, what I believe is to be the right way and loving people first, the wins will come.
Yep. No, I agree with that. Absolutely. During your time at Bedford, you went to the state championship game in three different divisions, Division One, Two, and Three, which is incredible to me. Has that ever been done before? I tried
Um,
researching it. I couldn't find anything on it. So has that ever been done?
great question, and I don't know the answer to that. You know, it's funny, and this is going to annoy some people, but I'm okay with saying it. My wife, who's my best friend, biggest supporter, has often said to me like, "How many wins do you have as a head coach over all the years?" And I really I don't know. I haven't taken the time. It wouldn't be that hard to go back and check, because I truly am at the point in my career where I believe to my core that there's not a greater coach out there than me. And let me explain that once again.
Sure.
I didn't say I believe I'm a greater coach than anyone else. That's a huge difference. I don't think there's a greater coach than me. And what I mean by that is it's how I define success. Yes, I want to win on Friday nights. Yes, we have to win on Friday nights to keep our job after a certain number of years, as we should have to. But how I define success is, are our student athletes academically eligible? Have I helped young men that were suicidal not take that drastic step? Have I helped a young man that got a girl pregnant walk through life with her, whatever that may look like or whatever? When you have a young man that comes out of the closet, have I been there to help them and not just have this Neanderthal coach that was with them when they were a stud, but wait a minute, that's you now? You know, I define success as, am I helping the young men and young women to be successful, as you mentioned, not only on the field, but off the field? And that's what it comes down to me. So I think, you know, if our only reason for coaching games is coaching football to win games, we may or may not last in this
Sure.
thing we call coaching. But if we really want to make a difference, a lasting impression in people's lives and leave an imprint here on earth, it's got to come through relationships.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said that any better, Coach. It was great. In 2012, you win Coach of the Year honors at Bedford. What did that mean to you?
It was very humbling, yet at the same time, it was something I made sure during that banquet that year, to make sure that every parent, player, and assistant coach knew that I have a hard time with that award, Coach of the Year, you know, because I don't think there's the coach in the history. There isn't. I'll just go out there and say there isn't. There's not a coach in the history of the game of football that's ever won a game by himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We can't, you know. So if we win a game on a Friday night, yeah, I'll take some credit for it. Got to give more credit to the young men and young women.
Right.
But
And
I also,
I had a coach on a few weeks ago. He coaches at my alma mater now, but he said that's a staff award because those guys are grinding.
100%.
You know, those guys are doing all the work that you don't necessarily want to do. You know, so he said that was a staff award. I thought that was pretty cool that he said that.
Well, and I'll just agree with that 100%. And that's what it is. It was humbling, but at the same time, it was not an award that I think should ever go to one coach.
Sure.
You know, change Coach of the Year to Coaching Staff of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, maybe we should make that a campaign.
Yeah, I think so. We might be onto something.
Yeah.
In 2015, your life changed drastically. You moved all the way across the map from New Hampshire to California. You had a ton of stuff going on at that time. Your daughter was at San Diego State. Grandkids, I believe, were on the way. Just a lot of stuff was going on in your life. Can you talk about that huge life change for you?
Yeah, it was probably the greatest leap of faith my wife and I ever had to take. We, as you mentioned, our oldest daughter had come out to San Diego State, and we visited, loved it. You know, never thought once about moving our lives. My wife was raised in Massachusetts. I was raised in Rhode Island, and we raised our family in New Hampshire. Had no reason or desire, although I hate the winter. Aside from that, I had no reason to leave New Hampshire. But as soon as our daughter had gotten married and had our first grandson, that was a no-brainer. We came out here right when he was born. And my wife and I remember looking at each other in the hospital, and we didn't even have to exchange words. We knew, like, we're about to move. You know, we're about to move here. And excuse me, I in my mind thought it would be a 1 to 3 year process. Hey, I got to network for a job. We got to try to sell our house. We got to get our house on the market and get it ready to sell. There was so much we had to do to that.
Right. Yeah.
What happened was through some networking within, I think it was 4 or 6 months, give or take, after we made the decision, I flew out here to San Diego, interviewed for a job in person, and it was just such a blessing where the superintendent at Christian Unified, where I still currently teach elementary school, said, Coach, we want to reimburse you for your flight out here, which even that few $100s, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Right.
And
Absolutely.
then and he said, we also, if you'll accept the position as an assistant coach at the staff there and as a 4th grade school teacher, we want to pay to move you across country. And that just blew me away.
Yeah. That's unbelievable.
It truly is. It truly is. So we just a few months after that, sold everything, moved across country. And the funny thing is, we hadn't sold our house yet. And one of the big arguments, my wife's my best friend, and we don't argue often, but one of the biggest arguments we had was prior to the move. She said, Kurt, I don't have a job yet. We haven't sold our house yet. We're not that family that can afford 1 month of mortgage and 1 month of rent. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So we've got to take that leap of faith.
Yeah.
So we signed over power of attorney to our house to our realtor, who we knew well. So it wasn't a
Right.
chance. We knew her very well through church, and we just started the drive across country. And it was 3rd day into our trip that she called and said, your house sold. So we were just
Yeah.
and elated. And then my wife didn't get her first job out here until about 3 or 4 weeks into our move. But once again, we were able to make it happen. And it's been 6 years now. We love, aside from the politics, which, man, I won't get into, but the politics in California are crazy. Aside from that, we love everything about it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's just crazy to me. Just dropping everything and you're out of there.
Yeah, and it really wasn't. It's funny too. And I think every coach can appreciate this throughout the country. When you coach high school football, there probably aren't many places we can't go out in public without someone saying, "Hey, coach." And I think most of us love that.
Yeah.
Back in New Hampshire, having taught elementary school for years, raising our family there and coaching for years, we couldn't go within like a 3-mile radius without someone saying, "Hey, Coach Hines."
Yeah. Right.
We move out to California. We knew no one, and no one knew us, and they shouldn't have. I'm not that special, although I think I am sometimes. But it really was an identity. Like, wow, like who am I without football? I was still coaching, but no one knew me. So it was everything and everyone we knew was back, minus our daughter, obviously our grandson, was back in the East Coast. So it was a huge leap of faith, but I have zero regrets about making that move.
No, that's awesome. Not too long after you moved to California, you found yourself at Christian High School, I believe. I believe it's in El Cajon. Is that right? Oh, El Cajon. See, I good. And that was home of the Patriots. You got hired as the running backs coach. Was it hard for you being an assistant coach? Being an assistant coach there than from being a head coach all that time in Bedford?
It was harder than I could have ever imagined.
Sure.
Yeah, it truly was. I think there are challenges on both ends, going from an assistant to a head coach. A lot of challenges, a lot of things to do. I think a lot of us, I'm guilty of it, when you're an assistant, think respectfully to either of you have the greatest respect, which I did for many of the coaches. I think we look at that and be like, I would do that differently. Or I don't know why he doesn't do that. And then we get in that position and we're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea all that was entitled. It was really hard, and Christian high school, as I mentioned, I still teach 4th grade at the elementary school there. It's a small private Christian school. Love everything about it. Because of the success that they have had over the years, they typically play up schools that are 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 3,000 student body more than what Christian is. And we were having success. Players are great, coaches are great, parents are great. I just really felt that call and desire to be a head coach again. Loved my time there. It was only 2 years, but that's really what drove me to want to be a head coach again, was to be in that position so I could hire the men or women to be on our staff that I believed had the same philosophy as I had. We're all going to have different skill sets, but I wanted to be in a position where I could, see someone that had a fire and a spark for changing lives as much as I do.
Now, you mentioned you're an elementary school teacher. Is that tough not being in the high school building with your athletes every day? Is that kind of tough?
Yeah, another great question. It is really hard. It is not ideal. I think in the best case scenario, you're going to have. I mean, I think in the best case scenario, you're going to have every coach in your staff be in that high school,
Yeah.
walk the halls, and I often talk about recruiting, and I think one of the best things that we can do as coaches is recruit our own hallways,
Yes.
recruit the weight room,
Absolutely.
recruit go to other sporting events, not just to support your student athletes that play basketball, also or track or rugby or wrestling, football, whatever it is, but also look at them like, whoa, hey, who's that athlete? And
Yeah.
not to take them away from another sport, but to respectfully wait till the season's over and say, hey, have you thought about playing football also? So
Right.
yeah, for me, not being on campus is I've made it work. I wasn't on campus when I was a head coach in Bedford. We made it work, but there are a lot of challenges that come with that.
No, that'd be very tough not being in the building of your athletes. I think, in my opinion.
It is, yeah.
What do you think is the biggest difference in coaching on the East Coast to coaching on the West Coast?
Minus the weather, I
I
still laugh because
was
where
gonna say in California, like we have about 2 feet of snow here in Ohio right now,
right?
and it's driving me nuts. Like right now, you're probably out on the football field throwing passing routes at your receivers and quarterbacks.
We were outside today.
See,
We were. It's funny. So I joke about the weather. Aside from that, I'm a firm believer. I've got two thoughts. One is football is football. You're going to have
yeah,
great coaches, great players, great programs. East Coast, West Coast, middle of the United States. Football is football. It comes
sure,
down to the fundamentals, passion, and know what we're doing. The one big difference that I've noticed that I'm not a fan of at all is just the number of recruiting and the transfers of kids from one school to another is a pandemic in itself, where
yeah,
you have kids that are constantly going from this high school to that high school. And it's funny because you have a lot of coaches that complain about it and will blame other coaches for, oh, they're recruiting and they're picking them off different 7-on-7 teams or whatever. And that does happen. But I'm also for a firm believer. We tell our players all the time, control the controllables.
yep. Control what
And
you can control. I think that's
yeah,
important.
and I think one of the best things we can do as coaches to encourage our players to stay where they are is to just coach them the best you can, love them the best you can, and respect them. And I've always told players that, my 5 years here at Coronado, we've had one, two, three, just four players that have gone to go play somewhere else.
Okay.
Um,
Wow.
and every one was 2 years ago because of COVID. We were not on campus here, and the young man went to a private school where they were on campus. I
Sure.
100% understood it,
Yeah.
supported. And the other three were parents really feeling that they had to be at a bigger school to find success. And I think if we take that out on the young men, then we need to get out of coaching. I've tried to make it a point. It's only been four so far, but with those four young men, not just to say it to them, but to follow up weeks and months later and say, hey, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you.
No,
And
that's awesome.
I think that speaks volumes because I won't mention names. I won't even mention the school, but my second year here at Coronado, we had a stud that parents pulled him out and sent him to a powerhouse school. And he was a young man here who was larger than life, great kid, was and still
Sure.
is. Would have been a stud for us, went to this powerhouse school and didn't see the field.
Right.
You know,
Wow.
so I'm a huge Cowboys fan. I grew up in Rhode Island. All my
Right.
family and friends are Patriots fans, or most of them. But the reason I bring this up is Leighton Vander Esch is a linebacker for the Cowboys who
Yeah.
ended up with Boise State. He never played 11-man football in high school.
Wow.
I don't remember where he grew up, but I remember reading an article that he played 8-man football and attributes a lot of his success to playing at a small school where he had to play Ironman football. You were on
Right.
offense,
Yeah. You were playing all sides of the ball.
every
Offense,
special
defense,
team.
special. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's but that's the biggest difference. Just the kids, transferring and leaving, and it is what it is. And I think once again, it's hard. Whenever you lose a stud, it's hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But if we're gonna truly be men of our word, we got to love them regardless of whether they're playing for. Not we don't have to. We should love them regardless of whether or not they're playing for us, and still be there
Absolutely.
for them.
You coached at you said Christian high school, which is a private school, but you've coached mostly at public schools throughout your coaching career up until that point. What was the biggest difference in coaching at a public school from coaching at a private school?
Great question. Gosh, the biggest difference I think was probably funding. You
Okay.
know, uh, and I'm saying this with a biased opinion. I love where I am at Coronado now. I loved when I was at Bedford. I've been blessed to love every school I've been at. Where I currently teach, still at Christian Elementary School, the parental support is off the charts. And,
Sure.
and I want to say this, for example, here at Coronado, tremendous support. Parents are
Yeah. I'll
phenomenal.
say you better say that.
Right. No, and it's true. We were gifted. This parent asked not to be mentioned, but this past year we got brand new jerseys, home and away, 0 through 99, from one parent donation. It was
Wow.
unbelievable gift.
That's
My booster president, or our booster president here, I'll give her a shout out, although she may never listen to this. Erin Everett, single mom of 2 boys that play for us. She is off the charts, unbelievable in everything she does. But for me, that's the greatest difference. I noticed that being at a private school, the support and funding, I'm not sure if it's the case everywhere, but seems to be at an
yeah,
even higher level.
sure. You were at Christian high school for 2 seasons. Then another big opportunity came into your life. In 2017, you got hired as the head football coach at Coronado High School in California, home of the Islanders. I see it in your
Yes,
background
sir.
there. In your 5 seasons as a head coach, you compiled a record of 26 and 25. You made the state playoffs in 3 out of 5 seasons. I think the one was COVID year, so that one doesn't count. Um, everywhere you've been, you've won. What do you think is the key to sustaining success in a high school football program?
Relationships, relationships, relationships.
Sure.
Yeah, I, 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 I that's it for me. I think you're going to have the toughest challenge have here at Coronado, and I love it. But it's out on Coronado Island, so a lot of very
Right.
affluent families, and then we have the North Island Naval Base. It is
Okay.
such a blessing to have the naval base. However, the challenge, and I won't say the problem, but the challenge with that is it's a revolving door of players and coaches.
Right.
That 3 years ago we had a stud quarterback who also played safety for us move in, and then right after the season, his father got transferred somewhere else,
Stationed out. Wow.
stationed out. Exactly. So it's a revolving door of challenges. I think having long lasting success is, and one of my greatest joys, and kind of goes back in my mind to that young girl with special needs with Down
Yeah.
syndrome, was when you have a young man come into your program that looks like he's a wounded or a baby giraffe running. You're like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to get this kid to run a straight line, let alone stem his
Yeah.
route and run a slant or whatnot. When you pour into those young men and they see and they feel and they know that you love and respect them, not because they're a stud yet, and not even because there's a potential for them to be a stud, but just I think we need to meet players where they are and then help them get to where they never thought they could be.
Right.
And when we pour into them like that, they are going to stay in the program, and the success is inevitable because whether it's their personal success on the playing field or the success that they were fourth string, and man, by the time they're a senior, they're a second string, but they're
Yeah.
making us better. I'm also a firm believer that championship programs are built on the backs of scout team players.
Absolutely.
And when you only focus on the studs, those scout team players that know they're going to be scout team players for at least another year or two, they're not going to show up to every workout. They're not
Yeah.
going to study film as much as they should. But when they know that you have a vested interest in their success individually and collectively, their level of success, even if they're not a starter yet, is going to elevate everyone else.
Absolutely.
I think every coach in the program, I'm guilty of this myself. When our scout team isn't giving us the look we want because they just don't have it in them yet. We might have a
Right.
time that's 240 and the scout team's 160. I think many of us, I'm guilty of it, say, man, so and so doesn't have this problem. This school doesn't have it, and we look at the big powerhouses.
Yeah.
They have the same problem. They might have 140 kids in their program or 190.
Right.
The scout teams are not as good as the teams they're going to face on Friday night. And when you get those young men to buy into taking pride in giving your starters the greatest look they can, it elevates everyone.
Absolutely. Then some success also comes from the weight room. I know you've been a weight room coach just about everywhere you've been. How important is the weight room for high school athletes?
Yeah, it's huge, not just for their physical development, but I think for any coach that's coached a season or more knows that most of us have a practice schedule,
Sure.
and most of us sticking to that schedule know that, hey, we have 15 minutes for kickoff, we've got 20 minutes OND time, we got however we structure our practices, we can connect with our players during practice, but it's go, 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 go. During the off season with the strength and conditioning, it's harder the bigger programs you have because you have that many more young men, young women in the weight room. But I think then we have a lot more time to work out with our players and to continue. It's going to go back to it, but to develop those relationships. I
Right.
know we had a player that graduated last year. I won't say his name, but started left tackle for us for 2 years. One of the weakest young men to this day I've ever coached in the weight room. He was successful because he was a technician. He
Yeah.
studied the game. His steps were near perfect. He was never strong. Even as a senior, his weights that he moved were embarrassing. And the reason I bring this up, not to knock him, I love the young man, but if I went to go spot him for a squat and I fit in under him and I'm
Yeah.
slapping his chest, he would have re-racked those weights with teary eyes, walked out, and never played again. But because I got to know him,
Yeah.
and I almost said his name, I know I could fit in with him and quietly, even with the music blaring, say, "Hey, I got you. I'm here for you."
Right.
And I just knew that that's what made him tick. Whereas
Sure.
other kids need that yelling and screaming and
Yep.
pushing. But yeah,
And every kid's different too. There's the kids that you could get in their ass, and then there's other kids that you need to
100%.
fairly
Yeah,
smack them on the butt.
yeah. And I look back, and once again, I started off the podcast sharing this. I had and still have the utmost respect for my high school coaches that I played for. However, back in 1987, 89, I graduated high school in 1990. I saw my coaches August, September, October, if we were blessed enough, November,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but I didn't see them for the rest of the year. I might see them around town every so often. And I think by being an active coach in the weight room during the entire off season, not only can I continue to say, "Hey, Logan, how are you doing with your grades?" and
Right.
continue to check in on them, knowing that, hey, if you fail in the winter, it doesn't affect us as coaches. They know that. But by asking them and having those conversations, they know that I truly care about them.
Sure.
And I mentioned his name, Logan. It was actually a young man, one of the young men at workouts today. Um, he has his own clothing line that he's trying to do some clothing stuff. Asking him about that, and you just saw his eyes light up, kind of like, "Oh, you remember that?" And just taking a vested interest in not just them as football players, but as human beings. It's a win-win because they
Yep.
know that someone truly cares about them, not just about their success as a football player.
Absolutely. Over your career, there must have been some tough times at some point. What would you say has been the toughest part of your coaching career?
Two things, yeah, definitely two things. There have been so many tough times over the years. The easy ones are losses. Losing it sucks, but that's the easy part. I'm speaking at a young man's funeral that I was blessed to coach who took his own life. Um,
And I'll mention this as you mentioned that my 2 years ago I was a head coach at Cardinal High School, and we had a senior that just graduated a year later took his own life, and that's an experience in its own. When you get that news, your heart drops.
yeah, it does, and I don't have regrets about it. I painted a house one summer with him. As a school teacher, we're always looking for other ways to make money.
Sure.
And I remember I was looking to ask one of the players, anyone want to make some extra cash, and spent several weeks painting a house with him. And when he took his life, it's God, it was one of those things like, did I do enough? Like, did I reach out
Yeah.
to him enough? And I don't have any guilt for it. I realize so many people battle with
Yeah.
depression and whatever it was. But that was one. And the other one that I can look back now with a lot of smiles, but also in the moment was the hardest, was coaching against my own son his junior and senior year. So when I was at Bedford High School, we lived in Goffstown where I had coached
Sure.
for 1 year.
Right. Yeah.
They were neighboring towns, but even though I was the head coach, we would have had to pay to tuition him in. It was a
Right.
public school. We didn't have the extra $12,000 a year at that time to
Sure.
put towards our child's high school education. They were going to high school for free. So I had to had the blessing, but struggle of coaching against him his junior and senior year, and both of those games happened to be homecoming games. So those were that, they did articles in the paper, they were on the local news and stuff. That was the hardest thing as a coach, aside from having to speak at a young man's funeral, was coaching against your own son.
Now, who won those games? Who has the bragging rights?
So I know my son listens to Jocko Willink and a few others. He won't listen to this podcast. We destroyed them his junior year. We had 144 young men in our program. Not I, but we had built a powerhouse, and we destroyed them. And it's funny because my wife, halftime of that game junior year, I'm running up the bleachers to use the restroom for a second, and I come up just around the corner and I see her stand there like this, and I was like, "Man," and she looks at me, she goes, "Knock it off." I'm like, "Jill, it was only 21-0 at the half."
Right.
It wasn't. We weren't running the score, but it was 20. I'm like, "Jill, don't worry, it's good." So I go to the bathroom. I'm jogging back down the stairs to talk to our staff about what we got, what adjustments we have to make. So right away, I'm like, "Guys, all starters are coming out," and they're like, "Coach, it's only one." I'm like, "Guys, all starters are coming out," And
I was gonna say, boss man said, "Knock it off."
She has spoken. We're done. So in the second half, we had all of our 2s, 3s, and the 4s in. We didn't run a counter trap. We didn't pass once in the second half. So his junior year, we had beat them 56-7 or something like that. Credit to his staff, or his coaching staff, and to him as a young man, his teammates. His senior year, we graduated a bunch of studs. Still had a very good program. They graduated very few. They had a wide receiver hybrid tight end that was going to Boston College. He was a senior. So all week we're like, "Listen, we are putting a D end on him, 7 technique, whatever it is. Don't let him off the line. Just do not let him off the line." And our safety, we said, "Listen, you're going to be 15 yards back, real back." This kid was such a threat, tall, fast, great hands. And we said, "Hey, listen, Joey's going to keep him on the line. Once he gets off, you're on him." Came down to one of the final plays. We were up, I think, by 6, and he got past our D end. Our safety didn't take his read steps, came up, and this kid ran right past him. Perfect ball through his hands. He dropped it. It was one of the only times I've been heartbroken as an opposing coach.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, So that was a game with a lot of tears afterwards, but a moment that I'll cherish with my son forever, because he had both his junior and senior year, played his heart out, and had the best games of his lives against us.
So you're saying Dad's 2-0?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have those bragging rights forever. That's awesome.
Although I will say that he can beat me in most lifts. Not all, but most.
Right. This leads me to you have a slogan, the power of why. Can you talk a little bit how you came up with that and what that means to you?
Yeah, what's funny? One of my wife's best friends, Wendy Garrity, I'll give her a shout out. I don't remember what title, but she holds several awards, if you will, in the United States Marine for being a highest ranking female official in certain things.
Wow, that's incredible.
She's an unbelievable woman. Unbelievable, she and her husband. But she mentioned one time, she said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Simon Sinek or Simek, whatever it was?" I hadn't at the time. And she was like, "Oh yeah, he talks about the power of why." I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute. People are going to think I'm plagiarizing or trying to steal or whatever."
Right.
So I know for a fact I'm not the first one that came up with it. I hadn't seen Simon Simek's stuff yet. He's phenomenal, like phenomenal. But for me and what I tell our players, my coaching staff and I, the players, the community, had built a powerhouse in New Hampshire at Bedford High School. Why did I leave Bedford to come here? My why is family. Faith for me is everything. Family is right there with it, and football's just beneath it. So I shared with them the only reason I left Bedford High School was because of my family, And the reason I share that is because I think all of us as coaches need to know what our why is. If our why is just to win games, we're not going to last long.
Yep.
If our why is to bless and empower and to change lives, we can be in a D1 program or we can be in a D6 program. It doesn't matter whatever state you're in. I know the rankings are different.
Yeah.
I want our players. I thought I was doing a great job with my leadership, and I feel like I'm doing a great job, and I know I have a lot of room for growth. Once I knew my why, I would share my why with everyone I could meet. What I wasn't doing, and I now try to do with everyone, is find out what my players' whys are. Because not every player wants to go out and play college football.
Right. Oh yeah. Every kid's different, Each home life's different. So you got to figure out which kid's why is for them, you know?
Exactly. And I think the more that we can help our players to find out what their why and not help them to achieve our goals, but help them to achieve theirs
Sure.
and then hold them accountable for it. If a young man says, "Hey, I want to go to college on a scholarship," then we need to sit down with them and coaches and say, "All right, well, listen, here, I believe in the underdog. I believe in the impossible. But
Right.
here's what a typical defensive tackle looks like at Division I college. Here's a
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
you're pushing $160. Typically, they're 270,
Yeah.
280.
Oh, yeah.
They're running a four, whatever. But so for some of our young men, their why is not football. They're using
Right.
football as a vehicle because they're coming from a really abusive situation at home, and that's going
Sure.
to get them out somewhere else or whatever it is. I think the power of why will. I told our young men one time after a tough loss, I said, most of you are going to marry the most beautiful girl you ever met. Not everyone will feel that way, but it'll be a
Right.
beautiful girl. I said, but if you marry her just for her beauty, God forbid she gets cancer and loses her hair, or God forbid she gets into an accident and is disfigured somehow, or God forbid you meet her at 120 and hey, you're married 15 years, she's 220 now. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
If
Right. Right.
your why is just superficial, most marriages aren't going to be successful. But if
Right.
your why is because you fall in love with a person and you want to grow with that person, then your marriage can make it through any struggle that you're going to face, and you will face
Absolutely.
struggles. And I think when I interview coaches, um, I hate that I asked this question, but I still continue to ask it. I always ask them, why do you want to coach? Or whether it's a new coach or someone changing programs. And they almost always give the interview answer. I want to make a difference. I want to give back. And I get that. And I agree with that.
Right.
Funny, and I always share with them that that's 99% of people's answers until the proverbial crap hits the fan.
Right.
Game that you thought you were going to blow the team away and you're down by 14 points.
Right.
And when we start seeing a different type of coaching styles than what they said when you were winning or they said during the interview, we really get to see true colors. So the sooner we can identify our why, help our assistant coaches or our fellow coaches and our players to identify their why,
Yep.
the sooner we can get to helping them reach that goal.
No, I agree. And a question I always ask when I would interview coaches was, what do you do for fun? Because if I'm going to spend 8 months out of the year, I better have to, crack jokes with these guys,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to have that relationship.
Yeah. Getting into your social media, Coach, you've gone viral. You have close to 60,000 followers. You've been on the New York Post. You've been on ESPN. Your voice has been heard throughout the coaching community. What has been the most rewarding part about getting your voice heard?
Honestly, things like this, Coach, just meeting other great human beings is something I'm passionate about. And about a year or two ago, my wife, and she is my best friend. I love everything about her. We spend so much time together. She had made a comment to me one time. We were going to breakfast somewhere on a weekend, and I was like, "Hey, give me a second. I just want to respond to this." And it wasn't. We weren't meeting a couple. We weren't late. I wasn't putting that ahead of her.
Right.
But she said to me, I remember this, and we joke about it now. She said, you don't have to respond to every private message.
Right.
And I looked at her, I said, you're 100% right, but why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I? If someone cares enough about a video I posted or something I shared, and one of the most rewarding things is when I will put something out there that's important to me or on my heart, and someone takes the time to watch it or read it or listen to it. And then they come back and say, Coach, I needed that more than you could ever realize. And I've never met this person.
Sure.
I think, man, that's what it's all about. If we can live our lives in a way that's going to lighten someone else's load and bless their life for a day, a week, a month, or a year, or a lifetime,
right,
then we're living our lives right.
And that's the thing, is that one message, you don't know how much of an impact that's going to have on you. You don't know what someone's going through at that certain time. They watch one of your motivational videos and boom, it just helps them through that day or that hour. I think that's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a blessing. It's some people I'm sure have followed me in the years past and then stopped following me because I'm a broken record. But it's about people. It's about making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, and I'm also sure that there's some non-rewarding things about people always trying to bring you down, not agreeing with something you post in one of your tweets or videos. How do you deal with someone that disagrees with your views, or how do you kind of handle that situation?
Yeah, with love and humility. We're all going through something.
Sure.
I am a firm believer that everyone on this planet is either, and this is a big spectrum, either battling depression, knows a loved one that is, or knows someone but doesn't know they are. And the
Sure.
reason I say that is everyone's battling something. We're all going through stuff. And when I get attacked on social media, I just take it from a place of, listen, they don't know me. I've never
Right.
sat down to even forget about sharing a meal with someone. I've never had a podcast opportunity for an hour or so to sit down and face to face with
Yeah.
99.9% of the people that will come out and attack me. And I won't mention this gentleman's name, but there's someone out here that about a year or two ago, I put something out there and they just shared it and lambasted it, and had no idea who I am. So I sent this person a direct message. And it wasn't, hey, let's meet up behind the post office like we're in middle school fight. I said to him, and I'll be careful not to say his name. I said, hey, we don't know each other from Adam. Let's go grab lunch sometime. Because I guarantee you we have more in common than not.
Right.
And it was funny because the response was, I'm not wasting my time to meet with you. And then on that person's tweet that was coming after me, someone else responded to them and said, Coach Hines is one, and it was very complimentary.
Sure.
And then the response to them publicly was, I would kick and went off. I'm like, wait a minute. So you're willing to go meet with someone and be a tough guy and try to fight them.
Yeah.
But when someone says, so I realized, there's a saying years ago that said, if you want to make everyone happy, sell ice cream.
Yeah.
Well, in today's day and age, you're going to upset someone because they're lactose intolerant or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know that and I tell my players this all the time, I can guarantee that no one will ever judge me again from the bleachers.
Sure.
Guarantee it. How do I guarantee it? Hang up the whistle. But I love the game too much. I can guarantee that no one will ever question, criticize, or critique another tweet I put out there. Why? Get off Twitter.
Right.
I'm too passionate about coaching, and I believe enough in my message, if you will, what I believe in to share, that you've got to take the good with the bad.
Right. And that's really a shame how people judge people without even knowing them. They hear things or they see something and instantly they don't like you. I think that's crazy. And that's what happens a lot of time in our profession too.
Yeah, it is. It's just you've got to take the good with the bad. And it's once again, I didn't come up with this, but we can't let our success go to our head, and we can't let our failures or our defeats go to our heart. We've got to take it all in stride. And when someone compliments me, it means a lot and I appreciate it. But that still doesn't define who I am just as much as when someone knocks me.
Right.
I'll listen to it. I'll try to reflect and be like, is there truth to that? See if I can grow from that. But that doesn't affect me either.
Sure. Coach, you mentioned you've been married for over 25 years. I believe you said you're in year 27.
Yes, sir.
And you have a pretty big family. How have they reacted to you becoming a pretty big name in the coaching world, almost a celebrity in the coaching world?
It's funny you should ask that. They've reacted differently. I think 3 of my children absolutely love it, and one gets a little annoyed with it when they see, they're like, oh my gosh, this guy I followed for years retweeted you. I can't believe, and I think they get a kick out of it for the most part.
Yeah.
I know my wife loves it. However, I think, as tough as coaching can be sometimes, I think it's a lot tougher for our spouses and our loved ones.
Sure.
Because it's hard for her when someone will, come after me to not want to respond. I'm like, Jill,
right. You just kind of bite your tongue and just gotta, trudge forward.
Yeah. And the cool blessing is, 95% of my speaking gigs or opportunities on podcasts or business opportunities that have all come through social media. I think there's a generation, there's a lot of people in the world that will knock social media and say, oh, it's horrible. And I think social media is just like a loaded gun. In the right hands at the right time, it's going to open doors and save lives. And if we use it the wrong way or selfishly, it's going to close some doors and hurt some things.
Absolutely.
Some people. But I think for the most part, they enjoy it and get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I had to ask that. But I want to give you the opportunity right now. Is there anything you would like to say to your family?
Yeah, I love them to death. They are my everything. It's funny when my kids were younger, when our kids were younger, Jill would come to a lot of the practices just because it was a beautiful fall day in New England, and she'd come to practices and she'd tow the kids along, and they still come to every game, and my grandsons come to every game. For years, I would ask my wife, maybe my first 7 or 10 years coaching, at the end of the season, hey, do you mind if I do it again? And finally, one time she's like, you got to stop asking. She's like, I know that this is one of your greatest passions. And she said, I love everything about it also. And the cool thing is, my wife and I pray together every morning and every night. And she hears about the players. She hears the players I'm praying for, praying about. She hears the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between.
Yeah.
But she is my greatest support system. And I make sure that every time I've been blessed to be a head coach, we never have meetings on Sundays.
No, that's good.
And the reason for that is I want our coaching staff to have balance. And I've heard too many coaches that braggadociously talk about, yeah, my family knows they're football widows during the season. And I always kind of shake my head. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If so many of us say, hey, we want to help our athletes become better men.
Right.
Well, if we really want to do that, then we need to teach them and model what balance looks like.
Sure.
You can be a successful coach and not put your family on the back burner and not pride yourself on never seeing them during the season.
Right.
So just, and I love that. I've never been asked that question on a podcast. What message I want to share to my family? It's just that thank you and I love them. They mean the world. They are my world.
No, that's awesome, Coach. Outside of your family, who do you think has had the biggest impact on your coaching career?
Wow. Outside of my family, I've got to right away give some credit to every coach I've ever coached with, even without mentioning names. It's just I think if we become a student of the game ourselves as coaches, we're going to always try to be true to ourselves and emulate, who we are. But look at certain things from other coaches and try to take from the good ones,
Right.
certain things and learn from them. And if we're smart enough, learn from the coaches that we may not respect and say,
Right.
hey, listen, he used to always say or do this. I'm going to make sure that I never find myself in a situation where
Right.
I'm talking to a young man that way or doing that. And then, Twitter is a beautiful thing. I've learned so much from coaches throughout this app that it's just such a cool platform.
Yeah, no, it is. Absolutely. Like we're sitting here right now. If there was not Twitter, I would have been calling your elementary school trying to find you.
Exactly.
So, Coach, as we wrap things up, Coach, I always ask, as a guy from Rhode Island that has coached for over 20 plus years and counting, who is Coach Hines for the listeners and viewers who might not know you? Who is Coach Kurt Hines?
I am a son of God. I am a Christian who loves everything about the Lord, tries to live I fail, and I'm not trying to be like a humble brag. I fail every single day, but I'm a Christian. I'm someone that believes it. And I have a lot of friends that aren't, and I have men and women in my life who are self-proclaimed atheists who are, although they wouldn't want me to word it this way, are very Christ-like in my opinion. I'm someone that just loves life. I'm a huge fan of The Office. It's the greatest TV show of all time, in my opinion. I paint murals. I love art. And I don't think there's a playlist out there that is good or of any quality if it doesn't have at least one AC/DC song on it.
I like the way I like that, Coach.
Yeah. So I think it's just that. I don't know how long God's going to have me on this earth for another 2 days or another 50 years. But I absolutely love my life, and I'm blessed to do what I love.
Oh, that's a good question. Coach, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much this has been amazing, just sitting down and talking with, just shooting the ship and bullshitting around. And then I really appreciate your time.
Coach, I appreciate you. It's truly a blessing to be connected. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch through social media. And if you ever need anything, just let me know.
Yep. Good luck this season. I also want to thank all of our listeners and viewers. You guys have been great. Tune in next week for a special edition of the Coach's Approach podcast, Flipping the Script, where I'll be sitting down with my former head football coach, George Burek. Tune in next week, and we'll see you later.
Welcome to The Coach's Approach, a podcast where we sit down with high school coaches and get the cold, hard facts about the high school coaching world. This is The Coach's Approach, where we talk X's and O's. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is The Coach's Approach, where we talk the X's and O's. Win the day or dominate the day. The choice is yours.